In this video we're going to learn some basic selection, layering and filtering effects in Photoshop. All I've done so far is I've gone ahead and gone File, Open, and I've chosen an image that I can work with. In this case it's a JPEG image of Harry Garside. I've then gone ahead, File, Save As, and I've changed it to a Photoshop document type. And that allows me to save all of my layer information and my file print settings and other parts of this document. So at the moment we have the image of Harry Garside zoomed in so that it fits in the screen. First of all, let's go down the left side here and work with the zoom tool. At the top where this bar is, you'll see a plus and a minus. And obviously that's how we zoom in and zoom out of the image. These other buttons as well, Fit Screen and Fill Screen, are quick ways to see all of your work at once. But normally we're going from the zoom tool to zoom in and zoom out. I'll just go Fit Screen at the moment because we're going to do some edits to this soon. Now on the other side of your workspace are these panels. You might be able to see a layer panel, you may not. Layers allow us to stack parts of images on top of each other to build up a really rich and complex Photoshop image. If you can't see the layer panel, simply go to Window, and in this alphabetical listing you'll see Layers, and when you click on it, it will appear on the right hand side. So what we're going to do next is duplicate our original image. You can see in the layer panel here it's got a lock against it, and that means we can't edit this image at all. But if we right click and we go Duplicate Layer, we can now start to make changes to it. So what I'm going to do is select a section of it and we're going to filter it. Let's actually zoom out a little bit more so that we can see the edges of the image. I'm now going to talk to you about these tools in the toolbar, and we don't use many of them in this task, but we definitely use the top few. This is the Lasso tool, and as you can see from the video, it's a great way to select parts of images. If I right click on it, there's 3 different ways that we can use this tool. Let's start with what we saw in the video. This is called the Magnetic Lasso tool. I might just zoom in a few times, zoom out once, just scroll up to get it in view. Okay, now I'm going back to this Magnetic Lasso tool. What it's going to do is find edges for me and snap a selection field to those edges. So if I click, it will start to do its job. Sometimes I click to give it a help along, especially if I think it's an important point that it needs to preserve and not lose. So I work with it, I don't let it work for me. And as I go here, I'm going to start to click along his jawline just to train it to find exactly the selection edge that I want it to work with. You can always go backwards as well, and you can go as slowly as you like, and you can manually click it as many times as you like. It works best where there's a high contrast. You can probably hear me clicking, and that's me just helping the tool along. Okay, when you get back to the start, you'll see the marching ants line, as it's called, and that means it's now a complete selection area. Now what we're going to do is work across the top menus and go into filter. There are lots of different filters you can use, and it would take a long time for you to check each single one of them. So the best way to work with these filters is to use the filter gallery. I'll zoom out so we can see the effect of our work. You can see the filter is being applied just to the area that I have selected. You'll see that his neck doesn't have the filter on it because it was outside the selection. So we simply go into each of these filter gallery options, and if you see an effect that you like, then you can go forward and use it. I quite like that stained glass effect, and I don't really want to adjust the settings too much. That's a pretty good result, and I'll now click OK. What we do once we have applied a filter, we then get rid of all the other image information on that layer. So we now go over to our layer, and underneath you'll see these little buttons. The one that you want to click is this one, which is a masking button. And whatever is selected is preserved, and whatever is not selected is disregarded and hidden. So I'll select my background copy. It's still being selected. You can see the marching ants line around it, and I'll click the layer mask button. You might not notice anything, but on the right hand side here we can see a black shape which is showing what's being hidden, and a white shape which is showing what's being kept. I'm now going to double click, and I'm going to call it filter 1. If I turn off this layer, that's the original image. Turn it back on, we can see the layer sitting on top. Let's try one more filter. So I'm going to hide what I've just made, go back to our background layer, right click and duplicate it again. And this time we're going to be using the Lasso tool. You can see I've zoomed out a little bit, and this gives me the edges of my picture. This is a manual tool. So what I want to do here is to just cut out a strip for his eyes. By holding down the button and marking out a torn paper strip that goes right through his eyes. Again, I'll go to Filter, but this time instead of using the filter gallery, I'm going to use some of the other settings that are not found in that filter gallery. So it's a bit of trial and error. Okay, so now I've got two effects. The filtered area has been selected, the layer is selected, and we go down and we do the layer mask. You can see again the white strip, which is the visible part of that layer, and everything black has been hidden. Let's turn off the background this time. So now we're hiding the background altogether. This checkerboard means there's no image information there at all. Let's turn that off and now turn on our first attempt at filtering. Let's now turn on the second layer. I want this layer, which I'll double click and rename Filter 2, to sit on top of Harry's face. All we have to do is drag and drop it. And now that filter sits on top of this filter. To complete the picture, let's turn back on the background. There's a few little extra points that you'll need to know. If you select an area and it's not quite right, you can always deselect it using this button, or using the menus at the top, select, deselect. So that's an important thing to note. Remember to always save your work, File, Save, and as we go through these options, leave them always as defaults. We'll click OK, so that next time we open this file, all of our print settings are preserved and our layers are preserved, which allows us to keep editing and changing up our work.